Morning and welcome to this mid-morning update on the markets where we are combining the early morning call and charting the markets. So we'll give you a flavour of both of what's happening. But after an hour's worth of the session, we've got an indication now as to what's happening on the London markets and indeed the rest of Europe as we return from the long weekend. Let's take a look at the headlines as we see gains pretty much across the board. We continue to monitor what's happening on global equity markets as the rally continues. After that long weekend, we've got to gain across much of the Asia-Pacific region overnight in the wake of what was overall a positive trading day yesterday on Wall Street. But for the record, we're up across the European markets. Let's take a look at other areas of which we're watching on this midweek trading session, the 27th of December. One of the stocks on the way up here in the London markets is AstraZeneca, knocking on the door of a 2-month high. It's expanded again in China. Now, this is the second deal in 2 months, but it's the first time it's bought a company in China. It's bought Gracell Biotech, and it's doing well in the markets as a result. And also, we're watching what's happening with base metals. We've got some good news coming through from China today, which we'll cover. But broadly speaking, we've got gains for many of the base metals on this midweek trading session. Take a look at volatility after an hour's worth of trade on the London markets. We are on the way down. In fact, we've not moved very much, but let me just quickly tell you that we're broadly holding on to the losses that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 days or so, which indicates that people are looking for risk assets on which to place money. And indeed, interestingly, we are not quite as high as we were back on the 20th of December, where we struck that new high that we've not seen in the London market since the 23rd of May. We got another new, very close 23rd of May high, not too far away from those highs that we saw, 77.51. This is a line to break on the candle close at 77.47. We are currently speaking just above that. And as I said, AstraZeneca, one of the stocks where we got gains on the trading day there today. Look at what's happening on the other markets around the world. In the European markets, we are currently down on the German DAX by a margin of 1/3 of 1%. We saw 24-hour trade yesterday here in London and across the rest of Europe, although the cash trading day for the first time this week in the German markets like we saw here in London. And a quick update on what's happening in the French markets as well. On the way down, but not too far away from that record high, that red line that we saw, which we've broken in the last couple of weeks, which were the highest we saw back on the 21st of April. So broadly speaking, the market's holding on to recent gains. Now, overnight in the Asia-Pacific markets, been some interesting moves overall. We've got a 12% gain for SoftBank on the Japanese markets today. A quick update on where we have been in Japan. Many of the markets across the Asia-Pacific region having seen gains today. I want to show you the shape of the trading day today on the Japanese markets. We're off the highs on the 24-hour markets, well off the highs, in fact. But nonetheless, still with a green candle. SoftBank Group shares jumping 6%, in fact, at the close overnight, after the Japanese conglomerate said it would exercise a T-Mobile option. Now, SoftBank will receive shares in telco T-Mobile worth $7.6 billion. Now, there's no additional cost either for this. We knew this was going to happen at some point, but the conditions have been set out in an agreement made as part of the merger of SoftBank's US telco Sprint and T-Mobile were met. Now, this means that SoftBank has doubled its T-Mobile US stake to 7.64% from 3.75%, but it has exercised those options, so it is worth cash on the balance sheet for SoftBank. Now, I won't show you the SoftBank shares. You can actually dial into SoftBank if you look at the CFD trade platform on the IG trading platform that we've got. You can either go into spread bets or CFDs. It is a CFD traded stock where it's up 6%, but it has added to the weight that we've seen on the Nikkei 225. Just show you what's happening as of the close and the markets in Hong Kong, because there has been a pretty good trading day there as well today, not just for the Hong Kong markets, but also the Hang Seng Stock 50. In fact, in the 24-hour markets, we are now down. Broadly speaking, holding on to some of the gains we've seen recently, 16,647. Staying on the charts, just wanted to quickly take a look at what's been happening on Wall Street, because we saw a trade yesterday on the cash session, yesterday's trading day. And indeed, we're not too far away from an all-time record high. Let me just quickly move this red line up to the highs that we had there on the intraday record high on the 20th of December at 37,645. Yesterday, we tried again to move over that, but failed. But we did close at a very close to an all-time high, 37,543, and we're holding on to that level there at the moment. Just to quickly wrap around some of the other stories across Wall Street in terms of some of the major benchmarks there. In yesterday's intraday session, the highest print we've seen since the 4th of January 2022, so very close to 24-month highs on the S&P 500. Not quite at the record high that we saw back in January 2022 at 48.18. But this market continues to rise. And Oppenheimer, I remember an interview I did about 6 or 8 weeks ago with Oppenheimer's chief financial officer, looking at 4,900 for the year end. It's not going to be too far away if we see a continuation of this trend that we've seen. Certainly Oppenheimer doing well on the back of their forecast for year-end trade for the S&P 500. So it's going into broad market, it's going into the Dow. Money is also going into the NASDAQ, the technology index. As of yesterday's intraday session, we saw a new all-time intraday high. We've tried to get above that today on the 24-hour markets, but failed at the moment. But nonetheless, looking for gains at the start of the day's trade at 16,876. So you can see, broadly speaking, we got gains pretty much across the board. There's an Apple story I want to follow up on in just a moment's time. But it's a broad sweep of many markets that we've seen, where we've seen some really big moves on the market. Bristol Myers Squibb. I just want to show you the Bristol Myers Squibb share price as of yesterday's close. If we can dial in, that doesn't look like that's the one I was going to try and go for. Bristol Myers Squibb has come up with an interesting deal where it's expanding in cancer medication. Let me see if I can get hold of this. It's not an all-session stock, but it's certainly going to be worth watching today. And I'll be talking about this at 1:30 today on the early morning call for the US markets later on Beat the Street on the IG platform. 51.44 is where that stock's going to open today. It's done the second deal in the last 72 hours, expanding its presence in cancer medications. And we'll cover this as a US stock to watch a little bit later on. Now, and amongst some of the stock market moves, or economic market moves, I should say, that we've seen, we've got some positive news coming out of China. Industrial profits improving in the month of November. Profits earned by China's industrial firms dropped 4.4% in the first 11 months of the year. The clear improvement, though, after the 7.8% decline recorded in the January to October period. Profits at state-owned firms declined by 6.2% compared to 9.9% in January to October. So don't get me wrong, it's still negative, but it is nonetheless an improvement, and an improvement on what we've previously seen, and an improvement on some of the expectations we're getting. Profit in the private sector rising 1.6% after a 1.9% decline in the January to October period. Let me just show you what's been happening with the markets in terms of the moves on the foreign exchange markets for the US dollar traded against the Chinese yuan, so we can just see the impact that this has had, where we've seen the Chinese yuan lose a little bit of ground against the dollar at 71.491. Just want to quickly update you on what's happening with the survey details, showing that ferrous metal smelting and rolling stock jumped by 275.6% year on year. Now, this indicates to me that the Chinese manufacturing sector is beginning to ramp up again, and it's likely that we could well see a continuation of demand for such as copper, which has been doing relatively well recently. Remember, I was talking about this last week, about this trade I'm waiting for. Just to quickly remind you of what's happening is inverted head and shoulders. I'm waiting for a break of this line here. Let me just get rid of that horizontal line just so that we can get a clearer picture of what's happening. It hasn't yet broken this neckline, but when we get a candle close beyond there, and that's looking as though it's going to happen sometime soon, it's certainly coming up against some interesting resistance in this market. When you get a candle close beyond there, my stop loss will come up underneath this rising right-hand inverted shoulder, and then I'll have a price target of 94.06, which will be the long copper trade that I'm wanting to take part in. Now, if you're into base metals, let me just quickly tell you, we're getting an interesting level here on the price of zinc, which is very close to this line of resistance here at 26.73. 26.36. Zinc is one of those metals benefiting from this news coming through from China and the smelting improvement in smelting numbers that we're getting, which indicates that they're beginning to eat into some of the supply that we've got for some of these base metals. If we get a break of this 26.73, we will then be at highs not seen in this market since the 9th of May earlier this year. Which is looking good for a recovery from what has been a pretty torrid period from the highs that we had back in August 2022, all the way up at 3,700. Here we are at 26.36. I think there's a lot of potential upside to go if we see a continuation of this demand coming through from some of these other areas of the market. Big gains yesterday for aluminium, and a continuation of that rise there that we've seen in today's session for aluminium. Iron ore is another one where we're seeing some big gains, 1.2% up today. In yesterday's session, we saw the highest print there as well, not seen since the 2nd of August 2021. So you get my drift in that we got this rise in non-ferrous metal smelting and rolling stock by some considerable margin in China, and that is boosting the price of some of these base metals. Now, just wanted to update you on what else is happening in amongst some of the other moves in the market, because we've got some interesting moves in the pharmaceutical sector. AstraZeneca stock is up more than 1.5% today at a 2-month high. It struck a deal yesterday to buy Gracell Biotechnologies, a Chinese cancer therapy company, for £950 million. Now, the operation allows AstraZeneca to expand in cancer research and treatment, which already accounts for around 1/3 of its overall business. Now, while this is AstraZeneca's first acquisition in China, it does already have a big presence in the country. China is Astra's second largest market. The acquisition of Gracell is AstraZeneca's second tie-up with a Chinese firm in 2 months after it struck a deal to develop a weight loss pill with the Chinese biotech firm Ecogene in November. If you look at what's happened after just over an hour's worth of trade on the AstraZeneca stock, you can see in the long-term picture we're off the highs that we've seen. Let me just quickly show you where those highs were. Back in April 2023, all the way up at £123.88. We've bounced off the recent lows recently. We're currently trading at 105.56. The market is up today, and if we close at these levels, it'll be the highest close that we've seen since mid-October. So that is a more than 2-month high. We're knocking on the door of that for AstraZeneca. As a result of this deal today, AstraZeneca made 13% of its revenues in China last year, and this deal continues to cement its position in the Chinese cancer market. In among some of the other stocks we're watching this morning is one tiddler that's come through with news this morning, and it's looking pretty good for Horizonte. Not as good as it was. This company, the nickel mine development company, has agreed a $20 million interim funding package provided by Orion, Glencore and La Mancha to provide liquidity while a full funding solution is hammered out. You'll remember back in October, where this stock was down almost 90%. Since then, we've seen a massive, great big that 90% loss of October has generated a mass resignations from the board, with the interim management team now reviewing the outstanding project capital expenditure and rescheduling and re-estimating all the outstanding expectations for costs. But in today's session, you can see if we look at what's been happening with this stock today, let me just show you. This is a 15% rise in the stock of Horizonte. So 15% is going to appear on your radar. But in the grand scheme of things, when we look at the context of all this and that big drop that we've seen there, it really is a very small rise. The bottom line is that they're now trying to schedule and re-estimate and work out the necessary implementation of a full funding solution for this business. Because, as we've just said, a lot of what's happening in the base metals business is now beginning to pick up again, and Horizonte could be in a good position because this is developing a mine that could well provide some really interesting nickel. And that was always Jeremy Martin's, the founder, and his board's ambitions to take part in what is otherwise an interesting market for nickel. You remember that we had all this business with nickel back from the LME a while back, where we saw that massive, great big spike. But since then, things have settled down again. Things are beginning to improve, and I think nickel is one of these metals where there's been a relative underperformance. It'll be interesting to see what happens here. But I think so far as Horizonte is concerned, it's all a question of working out where it goes from here. Now, just before Christmas, we saw some breaking news coming through. The British billionaire Jim Ratcliffe has struck a long-awaited deal to buy a 25% stake in Manchester United, his long-time team. Ratcliffe's stake purchase at $33 per share values Manchester United at $6.3 billion, including debt. Now, Ratcliffe pledges to invest $300 million in the club to try and revive its fortunes. Now, $200 million will be paid on closing of the deal, and a further $100 million by the end of 2024. Now, Manchester United did respond to this on the market yesterday. It trades on the New York Stock Exchange. A quick look at the share price chart, and you can see here that we did in fact rise above the highs that we saw back in September this year, and closing at levels that we've not seen since the 5th of September. Now, Ratcliffe's Ineos Group will take over management of the club's operations. This ends more than a year of uncertainty for the Glazer family, and it said back in November 22 they were looking for strategic options for the business. In a statement, Ratcliffe said, "As a local boy and a lifelong supporter of the club, I'm very pleased that we've been able to agree a deal with the Manchester United board that delegates us management responsibility of the football operations of the business. Certainly a club to watch, I think, as we go into 2024. I want to quickly shift focus back onto one of the world's wealthiest companies, Apple. It's filed an appeal to the International Trade Commission's decision to ban US sales of Apple's Watch Series 9 and the Watch Ultra 2 models. Now, there's been a lot going on in the sector recently because of patents. The models which Apple says are the most popular were banned by the ICT. It found that Apple infringed patents held by health tech firm Masimo on blood oxygen saturation readings and the technology that Masimo has allegedly initiated. Apple is also requesting an emergency stay on the ban for at least 2 weeks until a decision is made on redesigned version of the banned models. A quick update on the Apple share price chart, and you can see that we've been down recently, away from the record highs that we had, with the recent highs all the way up at $199.59. This red dotted line here is when the company turned back into a $3 trillion company. And this high that we've seen recently has meant that we've seen a whopping 60.72% up in the stock since the very beginning of this year. This blue box started back on the very first trades in January. And that is the benefit that we've seen. We've been talking a lot about the big gains that we've seen on the S&P 500 and the fact it's really concentrated in a few big companies. One of them is Apple. The sheer size of this business means that when it gains, it does twist the market quite considerably. The market for Apple will open this morning, all sessions on the IG platform, $192.87. Now, unpredictable weather due to climate change is forcing retailers to change tack, and some companies are adapting their operations faster than others. Angeline Ong has this look at what's happening in the retail sector.
Now, no matter who you speak to, the general consensus is that the world is warming up, and this has an impact on retail stocks. Now, Weather Trends International, a weather tracking firm, says that 2023's autumn started off warm. And as a result, many major brands are already slashing prices to get rid of winter inventory like heavy knits, jumpers, coats. But don't take my word for it. Listen to those with skin in the game. H&M says that shoppers have put off heavy autumn clothing purchases. COS also cut its online prices by 20% to shift warmer gear. And the ever-warming weather may be a negative for the likes of Walmart and Dick's Sporting Goods because those retailers that have stocked up too much on cold weather gear like Walmart and Dick's, they might not be able to shift it in time for when the season starts moving into the spring season. So it's interesting to see how all this is changing for many retailers out there. It could be a positive though for Costco Wholesale and TJX as well, because they're able to adapt to seasonal change quicker. So where's the salad dressing? Well, if you're choosing retail stocks, no matter what time of the year it is, make sure you go for stocks and companies like Abercrombie's described as those having seasonless products, clothing you can wear and layer up no matter what the weather.
Effective weather on retailers with Angeline. Just a quick other couple of areas of the market worth following up on. The concerns about geopolitics around the Red Sea is seeing money added to the oil markets. Let's take a look at what's happening. First of all, with Brent, up above the $80 mark. We were talking about this at the back end of last week. Investors are monitoring Red Sea developments where some major shippers are resuming passages through the area despite continued attacks by Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi militia. I note that API and EIA weekly inventories are expected tonight and tomorrow, respectively, a day later than normal. Both reports due because of the Christmas holiday weekend, where we've seen a delay. But we continue to trade up, and I suspect if we do get further evidence that there is shipping beginning to move through the Red Sea and through other areas of concern that we've seen recently, we might see a little bit of money taken off the table here. But at the moment, at least, Brent is holding on to $80 a barrel, and we're above 75 as well for US crude, 75.34, holding on to recent gains as well there for that. And finally, just want to follow up on what's happening with the price of gold. I was talking about other base metals earlier on, and precious metals, exactly the same trade. We're up at 2068. If we close at these levels, it'll be the highest close that we've seen since the 1st of December, before that big drop we saw back from the record highs on the 4th of December, Monday, up at 21.21. But that's still my price target. If you continue to trade this long, you just bring your stop loss up underneath you as things continue to improve to lock in profits. That's it. We are back at 1:30 p.m. today, where I'll be taking a look at some of the US stocks to watch in the session in today's trade. Manchester United certainly continues to be of interest, and Apple, of course, that news out overnight about the potential patent infringements could well have another steer on that stock. That stock has already now started trading or sessions on the IG platform, and broadly speaking, it's holding the recent losses, so that'll be a stock we'll follow up on at 1:30. Hope you can join me then.